Hello, everyone. Welcome back to English Champion. I'm glad you're here. Today, we are talking about the topic that has been going around in the media and elsewhere for a little while now about whether or not college will end up being worth it, how many more schools will close, what other problems keep emerging from our universities today. And I want to look at an article that came out actually quite a while ago, a couple months ago, in the Chronicle of Higher Education. And I've been kind of holding on to it to see what else would develop. And I thought we'll go ahead and get into it because I'm going to introduce some other related ideas on this topic in the coming weeks. And so I thought I'd kind of kick it off and we'll keep adding to it as we go. So this is an article by Scott Carlson. And the piece is going to try to defend universities. But along the way, there's also going to be a lot of the problems exposed. And so I'm going to try to go back and forth about some of the good things, but also a lot of the problems. And ultimately, I think you'll see that I disagree with a lot of what Carlson is saying and the way he's presenting it. And there's just so many opportunities to do this better. And I wish at some point people at the universities and then the writers who write about them would just do it better. So he starts by saying this is an unsteady moment for higher education. First of all, I'm getting absolutely sick of when people use the word moment. This isn't a moment. This has been going on a long time, okay? 5 years minimum, maybe into the decades, actually. It's not a moment, okay? Politicians do this a lot. People who try to sound, use like lofty language. This moment in our history, it's not a moment. It's a time period. Use the words properly. This is an unsteady moment for higher education, and amid the pandemic aftershocks, demographic pressures, and self-inflicted wounds, we will definitely see more colleges close or restructure with layoffs, even colleges with recognizable names. When cultural institutions or industry sectors get wobbly, the media has a tendency to pile on, declaring doom. Okay, so this is sort of half right, sort of not half right, not right. The media, I think, is very invested in universities being successful. So if they are calling out universities and the people who run them and are kind of presenting the data and telling the stories of how these schools are failing, I don't think that's really in their best interest. I don't think they want to do that. People who go to big time universities, they're the same people who mingle with the media people, the big time newspapers and television channels, the media outlets. They're part of the same club. I don't think the media wants universities to fail. So by the fact that they are even presenting this as an option, I think we have to take it seriously. And trust me, media outlets are not piling on. All the stuff they're describing is very real. Take it from someone who's been at universities for almost 20 years. All of this is accurate. So it's not piling on. It's not exaggerated. It's not trying to just panic people. This is real, and so we have to deal with it. So he starts by presenting some context. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that had come out that week as well, where the author, he says, paints with too broad of a brush about the problems in higher education. He said that higher education is a bloated system suffering from its own blunders, and it's sort of just landing on the idea that college isn't worth it. In that Wall Street Journal article, the author recaps 60 years of higher education history and draws a thread through all of the various problems that have kind of led us to where we are. That it's not just one thing; it's accumulation over time of all these problems that have now reached kind of a tipping point. Finishing his little summary, he says, now the ideal of college for all has become broken for most, as employers ditch degree requirements and Gen Z students and their parents are looking for alternatives to college. As I'll go further into this alternative idea, that's a good thing. Whatever comes next, a former president of Columbia, in discussing Gen Z, it's not going to come soon enough for them. And for many of them, what's next will continue to be college. We'll see about that. So he just kind of gives background about this Wall Street Journal article. Now he's going to disagree with a fair amount of it, and then I'm going to add some detail to it. In relating how we got to this place, the journal's essay has little room for nuance, which is what we need when talking about the future of higher education and whom it is for. This issue actually doesn't need a lot of nuance. It's pretty obvious what the problems are. People are just too afraid to let it be known. However, I am going to add some nuance to this topic because what he's going to try to do actually doesn't add a lot of nuance. I'm going to clarify it, which will help with the nuance part. So it's actually an obvious problem, and any nuance that needs to be provided, this author doesn't really do it. I will help him do it. All right, so there's a person from the American Enterprise Institute that he quotes. He says, we've kind of been on the college for everybody bus for decades, and it has paid off for the economy. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Says this guy who has long researched and worked in the areas of job training and workforce development. I don't know if that's completely true. There are certain parts of the economy that have probably benefited for sure. Tech mostly, I would say. But there's also no way of knowing exactly if the push towards education all these years has actually led to some of the growth in the economy, or if we would have grown naturally otherwise because we were already developing on that path, particularly after World War II. So I think he's kind of making a causation argument, which I don't know if there's a lot of hard evidence for that. We can see the results and go, oh, this must have been caused by that. We're uncertain if that's actually what happened. Maybe we would have been successful anyway. The college for all push swept in some people who weren't ready, couldn't really afford it, and perhaps didn't have a clear idea of why they were going. People who wound up dropping out or underemployed, burdened with debt. All of that is completely true. So it's interesting that we're admitting these problems here, and then we're going to go, oh, but those really aren't the big problems, and there's nothing to be worried about. Those are huge problems, and he's exactly right, this guy who he's interviewing, that the idea of college for all is really at the bottom of all of this. That's going to bother some people because the idea of giving access is usually a good thing. We want people educated. We want people of all backgrounds and class levels educated. But it has also caused a lot of perhaps unforeseen consequences that people aren't really willing to admit. And so it's now happening. In the national conversation, the net result seems to be for the pendulum to swing completely in the other direction to say college doesn't work, and it sucks, he says. And that's just equally as bad. All right, so here's where the nuance comes in. They're sort of setting up this dichotomy that it's either college is great and everyone should go, or there are bad things and it's terrible and no one should go. And that's not true either. College just doesn't work like everyone assumes that it does or assumes that it should. And that's the real problem. What people are getting out of college and what other people are expecting out of college isn't aligning with what actually happens. And because of other advances, there are more options now. We have alternatives. And so don't be surprised that those alternatives are going to be critical. And college is going to look bad. So they're going to need to learn from this. But yeah, that's where the nuance is it's not that the whole media industry or everyone in America now is like, oh, college is horrible, it's not worth it. No, we're just shining a light on the fact that what you all thought college was isn't actually what it is. And we need to decide if we're going to do something about that. That's all. This guy from the AEI, his latest report argues that college graduates clearly get a significant earnings premium and garner many frequently cited quality of life benefits too, like working for companies that provide more supportive environments or having better health outcomes. More broadly in society, college graduates strengthen communities through their wealth and civic participation, the report notes, and institutions of higher education drive economic growth and improve quality of life. Maybe. That could also be a selection bias problem. We need to work on the logic a little bit here. It's not so obvious that this is completely true. It could just be that the type of person who also values college is also the type of person who chooses to work in certain types of industries, chooses to take care of their health better, chooses to strengthen their community by being a good neighbor or doing volunteer work, whatever. Those might just be the same type of person. It doesn't mean that all people going to college are the same and college made them into this type of person. We could just be measuring, these are the results. The type of people who went to college in the first place were probably those types of people who would have ended up with those results anyway. So I'm not saying he's wrong. I'm just saying we need some clarity on the logic here because there could be some selection bias in his information. Here's where it gets interesting. Yes, colleges have their problems. All right, so the author is going to admit basically all the problems that the guy from the Wall Street Journal already laid out, and then he's going to come back and try and contradict it. Yes, colleges have their problems. They have made both common and extraordinary missteps in managing their finances, overbuilt campuses into a deferred maintenance crisis, and accumulated significant debt, with the burdens often passed on to students in the form of tuition increases. Yep, all true. They have erected bureaucratic barriers for students and often have been willing participants in a system that exacerbates the distance between high and low income students, with non-white and low income students carrying more significant debt. Again, true. Meanwhile, many colleges have settled into their role as a mere signal to employers while touting the value of college for all, which has overshadowed the need for vocational hands-on learning, rudimentary practical skills, and alternate pathways like apprenticeships. So all of that is true. All right. So when he said the guy from the Wall Street Journal was painting with too broad of a brush, no, all of those things are accurate. You can't deny those things. Trust me. I've been at all types of universities for a very long time. All of that is real. But then he's going to come back to the other side. But despite its problems, American higher education has demonstrated its usefulness and is still valued by large swaths of the American public. In a Chronicle survey of the public perception of college, nearly 80% of those who had graduated said college was worth the cost, while about the same share of all respondents would recommend it to a friend or relative. Again, depends on what you mean by worth the cost. We need some clarity on what kind of question was asked exactly. If it's worth the cost in, did what I study specifically teach me what I needed for my job? That might not exactly be so obvious. Is it worth the cost because you made a bunch of friends and maybe you met your spouse there and maybe you met a lot of interesting people like various professors or staff members who you learned a lot from or just had good relationships with? Yeah, that might be worth it too. When you just say, was college worth it? There's a lot that goes into college. You need to parse out that kind of question before you just paint. Speaking of painting with a broad brush, that question and that data could be a little more specific. Many institutions are holding steady in enrollments, and some are even doing very well. And although many employers have dropped degree requirements amid the enthusiasm for skill-based hiring, companies are still largely hiring people with college degrees. For now, we'll see. A college degree may just be a signal, this other guy had said, but employers in the knowledge economy see the undergraduate degree as the closest approximation to life in the workforce that you can be without actually being in the workforce. Again, we'll see if that continues. That's the problem people are bringing up is, yeah, it is for now still, but that might be changing. I think they look at, here's a quote, I think they look at the completion of a degree as indicating in a certain kind of mind, a kind of intellectually curious person, which when you boil down all of the non-cognitive attributes that employers say they value most, that's a lot of it. All right, so this is a big problem. This used to be the case, but it's not, and it hasn't been this way for a while. Employers, ideally, would judge new graduates and people they wanted to hire because you would assume they would have learned a lot in the last 4 years and they're ready for that type of job. We now know that's not happening because employers report every year how new employees who are recent college graduates are not qualified or not ready for the workforce. However, universities or the employers could still get around this a little bit, even if they acknowledge, and this is still happening, but again, how long can they continue this? Where employers could still say, okay, we're seeing that they're not getting a lot out of college, but entrance into college is still a pretty good signal because, at least in the past, you had to take an SAT or ACT, which is, by all measures, an intelligence test. It just is. People don't like to hear that, but that's what it is. It's gauging how much do you know, and if you know a lot, that means you can learn more. If you already don't know a lot, you're going to struggle learning more, which is what those 4 years of college is for. So at least the employers could go, all right, you're not learning a lot in college, but you at least had to get into college, so you must be sort of bright, so I'll take a risk and hire you and I'll just train you. But now we're also seeing that because of college for all, everyone gets into college, whether you have, any level of intelligence or not, and many colleges got rid of their SAT and ACT requirements. Now, many have wisened up because they realized, that was a catastrophic mistake during COVID to not have SAT and ACT scores, because they let in everybody and they're seeing students are like, yeah, you don't belong here. You're not going to make it. You're just not smart enough to handle college level work. So it's kind of a double-sided thing. There's a problem on the admission side because we've let in students who don't deserve to be in college, and we haven't given them an appropriate screening process by having an SAT or ACT score. And it's on the output side where when they graduate, they also aren't qualified. So it's along the whole spectrum from admission to college to exiting college and the supposed learning and education along the way. It's all collapsing. So that's what employers are so concerned about. And then, kids can't get jobs or they can't get promoted. And they're going, gosh, why did I go to those 4 years of college? I can't even pay my bills because they won't give me a high quality job. It's like, yeah, it's because you didn't learn anything in college and you shouldn't have been in college in the first place, probably. So those are your problems. You could have saved $200,000 and just started working and learning gradually. And after 4 years, you'd probably be better off. That's what employers are demonstrating. And that's what kids are realizing and their families. And that's why all this is such a big problem. And until employers are realizing it, but until colleges realize it, this is only going to get worse for them. So why is the narrative, again, I don't think that's a narrative, that these are just facts, focused on these negative outcomes? In part, this other guy believed that we're always looking for dangers, and we're especially wary because of, what happened in 2008 with the Great Recession and, again, stuff with the pandemic. There's all this instability, and so people are just constantly worried. The stakes and the consequences of the decision to enroll in college are part of what drives an outsized focus on income. One outcome, which is a high-paying career, a singular goal in which many young people, that he sees in many young people through his work at the AEI. People have other priorities, and we need to communicate that there are a lot of different models for a successful life, he says. You may prioritize a lower standard of living in exchange for more freedom to live the way you want to live. That's all very true. Young people today, the data show that they're hyper-focused on making a lot of money as fast as possible. And that is very different than the way it used to be 40, 50 years ago. Part of that is understandable because young people do face a different economic climate than people who went to college in the 60s and 70s. So they're further into debt and they need more money to try to get out of debt and go on and live their lives. And so it's understandable that that's where their focus is. But we as educators need to do a better job of helping young people realize that, first of all, they don't need to spend that much money on a college education. You can find places that are cheaper, but also that your life goals should be more than just making money. That's what the path I've chosen. I don't really care that much about how much money I make because I value my autonomy and freedom to do whatever I want to do more than anything else. And so my whole career, I worked jobs that allowed me to do what I wanted to do. It was the consequence of that I, didn't make a bunch of money. Yeah. But also with making a bunch of money comes a lot of stress and hours and inflexible working conditions that I wasn't really interested in. I like doing what I want to do. And partly the consequence of that is, yeah, you sometimes don't make as much money. So we need to offer that to students where you go, look, I understand you want to make money. We all want to make more money. But there are other things in life that you'll actually value more probably. So don't be afraid of pursuing those options as well. And whether that includes college or not, that's up to you. But young people today aren't even thinking of that as an option. Ultimately, the discussion needs to shift away from an either-or frame to focus on the individual goals of students and what path might best lead to those goals. This is not a quick decision based on the average salaries of majors or other misleading data, but a long process of reflection and dialogue. Exactly true. And this is where good advising comes in. So if students do want to go to college, most universities have gone to this model of like career counseling. Every school has a different name for it, but like enrollment manager types of people where they're the people who help you schedule for your classes. And then they talk to you like, well, what do you want to do with your career? No offense to these people, but they don't know anything about the fields that the university is trying to teach these students about. If you're a psychology major, some person working in the registration office or enrollment office, or even a career counselor, does not know the details of what it means to go be a counselor or a therapist. They might have the basic overview, but you don't know what that life is like. You know who does? The professor who probably did that or still does it. They might, I know lots of professors who they teach, but they also keep their counseling practice. They kind of, they do one on one day of the week and the other on the other day of the week. And that's the expert you should be talking to. And too many times on college campuses, we're funneling these students because we kind of treat them like a conveyor belt. Like they come in and they go to this administrator and this administrator and this staff person and this staff person. And then they go to their class where they supposedly learn their knowledge or their skills. But then they go and they use, they leave their class and they go back to their administrator or their staff member and they talk about things. No, you should be talking to your professor. That's who should be advising you on what life is like with that kind of degree. What kind of jobs can you get? What is your intellectual life and your social life look like in that career field? Universities aren't doing that. It needs to get back to the investment of the teacher-student relationship, and students will be a lot better off because they'll just learn a lot more about not only their subject field through their coursework, but also what it's like to be a professional in that field. So part of that is going to show up here, and what the alternative schools are doing, which is correct, that these universities need to get on board with. Students have to be basically accompanied in this journey by adults who are wiser or more experienced. Yeah, those are the professors. That's who they should be listening to. And the professors need to be willing to help them do that. You can't just be a teacher who stands in the front of a lecture hall and then leave at the end of the hour. To be a good teacher and to develop the universities the way they should be, where we're really cultivating these young people to be successful, you need to spend time with them and talk to them about their future goals. Don't just pass them off to some staff member who doesn't know anything. I'm sorry, they just don't. This is the big shift we need to make to have that kind of conversation. Exactly right. Other factors, often sitting beneath the surface of this discussion, are also driving the negative view of college. Of course, ideology and politics are among them, with Republicans losing the most confidence in higher education. The biases aren't always elucidated in the media. There's a survey that said most companies say that college isn't worth it for their employees. The story neglected to have mentioned that both of the companies involved in conducting the survey have an ideological bent, with one seeking to connect reliable job seekers with serious companies without all of today's woke nonsense, as the founder describes it. So I don't know if that's ideology. That might just be a good option. These companies or people doing these surveys or this research, they have the right to present the research. Doesn't mean they're ideological. Maybe they're just presenting some data that you need to be aware of. Also, this idea of the politics is very interesting because there's a bit of a disconnect here in the culture, because so many on the left say that Republicans only care about money and they only care about, gathering wealth and status and all this stuff. And if you're arguing that college is what leads you to getting higher paying jobs and, higher status careers, then Republicans should be the ones who most like college and most endorse it for their children and people they know. So which is it? That Republicans love money and status and high paying careers, or that they don't like college? Because you're trying to have both. And the problem is the Republicans are the ones who are becoming much more aware that, again, like I said before, what we say college isn't what it is. It maybe used to be that way. It's not anymore. And Republicans are the ones wising up to it and going, maybe we should do something different. Maybe there should be some alternatives that offer people ways to be educated that aren't necessarily at a 4-year state university or a prestigious Ivy League school or whatever. Maybe there's other options. Maybe that might be better. Yeah, sometimes is it tied to their aversion to wokeness? Maybe. But many of them are just going, boy, we thought college was doing one thing. It's really not, and maybe there's something else we could do. So I would hope other people would come around to that, not just people on the right, but not yet. We'll see if that happens. The other agenda under the surface, a long-standing drive to get a piece of the hundreds of billions of dollars swirling around the higher education space. A number of companies are in the business of making money by offering alternatives to college or supplemental academic courses or programs. Yeah, again, alternatives, they're trying to fulfill a market need or find customers, of course. So yeah, that's their goal. They want to make money while they provide a service. But also, Do you not realize that universities, any university, is in the money-making business? Like, if you don't know that, you don't know anything about education. If you think, oh, it's only these alternative places that are, they're just in the business of making money. No, this is like, Michael Corleone and The Godfather telling Kay, who's the one being naive here now? Okay. Every school, state school, private school, small school, big school, doesn't matter. They're in the business of making as much money as they possibly can. Trust me. So these schools, these alternatives, they benefit from the narrative that higher education is too slow, too distant from the workplace, and too ineffective to offer students what they need to find a good job. Yeah, we'll see if that works for them. But if that's how people are feeling, then they have the right to provide that for people. There's a few examples of these places that are providing apprenticeship programs. That these other, colleges are a bit closed off. They don't really know what the business world or the industries, the career industries need. And so they're going to provide something that's more specifically tailored to those industries. Yeah, great. That's fine. There isn't always this same skepticism for the emerging for-profit alternatives. Several years ago, this guy who does these apprenticeship programs was touting and investing coding boot camps as faster and cheaper alternatives to college, something that students who couldn't get into selective universities might consider as a gateway to a first job, he said back then. But boot camps, once seen as a disruptor that would blow up job training models and the higher education space, have run into a series of problems related to their recruiting practices, costs, and postgraduate outcomes. Like regular universities, recruiting practices, yeah, you're allowing in people who shouldn't be in college. Costs, it's way too expensive. And postgraduate outcomes. People don't graduate, or if they do, we find out they weren't educated properly. Yeah, they're probably having the same problem that all universities have. So everyone at every level has to figure out this problem and provide a better service. That's part of what the market does. If you can do it, great. If you can't, yeah, you're going to fail. Whether you're a large university or a small alternative company, yeah, if you're not doing a good job, you should fail. That's how it goes. This other guy who's an executive director at some institute, whose founder has expressed doubts about the future of American higher education with his prediction that 50% of colleges would go bankrupt sometime this decade, recently walked back his institute's enthusiasm for these alternative school apprenticeship program boot camps. So in other words, there's a lot of people offering alternatives, but even those aren't working very well yet. We'll see if they kind of learn from their mistakes and something better comes along. That's what the market does. And that's what universities have sort of in the last, 20 to 30 years, especially maybe not 30, 20 years, it's been everyone has to go to college. And so the universities have kind of had this monopoly on young people's minds that, if I don't go to college, I won't ever be able to get a good job and I'm going to be a failure, which absolutely is not true. So now universities are a bit concerned because other alternatives are popping up that say, yeah, maybe you don't need a 4-year degree. We'll teach you things that'll get you ready for a specific career in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost, and you'll be ready and your employers will be happy to hire you. Yeah, that's a valuable option. So universities are a bit scared because they are facing competition that for the last 20 years or so they haven't really had to face. But this narrative has been known to take hold over the years, even among those who work within higher education. More than a decade ago, when massive open online courses and badges started arriving on the scene, the president of Northeastern University said those alternatives would herald the end of higher education as we know it. So again, he's saying, there's been these options before, and here universities are still flourishing for the most part. So they'll probably withstand these alternatives as time goes on. At the time, one of his colleagues and I wondered whether all this talk of reinvention was mainly aimed at students who don't have the resources to get into top-tier colleges. Might have been then, but now it's for everybody. The same dynamic is at play today. While some people will buy the argument that college isn't worth it, wealthy and connected families know better. They will continue to spend huge sums to get their kids into the right school at the right program. Again, for now, until those families just hire somebody who they want their kid to get an engineering, computer engineering job at Google. Well, how long will it be before those families, because they're already rich and successful, will just go to Google and say, I'll hire you. I'll pay you $200,000 to privately teach my son or daughter how to do all the engineering so that he or she can end up at Google too. Why wouldn't that happen? Of course that will happen. So it may not be these alternative schools or these apprenticeship programs. Wealthy people, yeah, for a while, the name Harvard, the name Yale, the name Princeton, etc., they still hold their currency, and they probably will for a little while still. But how long until people wise up and they're like, you know what, if I could spend $300,000 sending my kid to Princeton, or I could pay some 26-year-old at Google who already did all this and have him just be a private tutor for my child, and then my kid will end up in the same place in 2 years instead of after 4 years. Why wouldn't people think that's worth it? Of course they'll do that. Everyone's going to look for alternatives. It just depends on how quickly that'll happen. The country has spent the past 80 years making enormous investments in its higher education infrastructure. Why would we toss it aside, even rhetorically, rather than put more effort into fixing it? Okay, so here's the conclusion of the article, where he comes back around to saying college is definitely worth it. And why? Well, he just spent whole paragraphs previously telling us about all the problems that are true, and they do exist. But he said, but why would we want to abandon that? Why wouldn't we put more effort into fixing it? And what does effort mean? It means more money. So this guy is proposing the ultimate government solution, which is what everyone says about government. Well, if that didn't work, it wasn't because there was a problem with the idea or the policy or the law or the application or implementation of it. Oh, we just didn't have enough money to fund it. Instead of going, well, no, maybe the whole thing didn't work because it was dumb, or it was run poorly by people who aren't very smart. Yeah, maybe we need to scrap it and do something else. So this is the mentality. The reason colleges are struggling, well, we just aren't working on fixing them. Okay, it depends on how you want to fix them, because there are a number of fixes, and I'm going to offer those in the next couple of weeks. But a lot of these people are going to say, well, we just need to invest more resources. We just need to pour more into these colleges and provide these students with the best equipment, the best professors, the best administrators, and then everything will be better. It's like, do you realize how much money we spend on universities already? As I already said, this is billions and billions and billions of dollars. And yet, look at the results we're getting. Students are not educated. They don't know anything, and they're not ready to be employed. How is that worth it? There has to be something changing here, and more money isn't going to do it. So exactly what are your options? Or what are your solutions? The current pressures are likely to force change, and many difficult but clear steps could help colleges survive and improve their outcomes. Know the revenues, costs, and mission relevance of your academic programs. Yes, that's true. Deepen the interactions that students have in advising and career counseling. Again, with professors. That's who should be doing it. Do away with barriers to transfer and other bureaucratic hassles. Yes, good idea. Reform the incentives for faculty to emphasize teaching and offer more training to help them improve at it. Yes, good idea. Form partnerships with other colleges to share resources, even courses. Make more connections with community organizations that can offer opportunities. Incorporate more hands-on learning. Much of the time, colleges need to get out of their own way to pull off these moves. Yeah, those are all great ideas. And you know what? Almost none of them cost hardly any money. So that's great. These are types of things that people should be doing. I have more ideas I'll share with you shortly in the coming weeks. But yeah, this is all good. Next paragraph. But they also need the public's support, meaning money, to make these shifts. It always comes back, oh, you just want more money. Okay. Again, you thought universities weren't money-making organizations? Of course they are. Even your ideas, you say, need to cost more money. And a narrative that argues college isn't worth it undermines the argument for reform and will push more institutions into closure. Maybe closure is the form of reformation that's needed. I don't know. Once these institutions are gone, they will never return. Well, they'll just return in a different form. That's the whole point. These other schools, apprenticeship programs, boot camp kinds of things, certification programs, they're just coming. That's just a different form of education. It's still education. Yeah, the institution is gone, but higher education will always be there because people will want to be educated somehow. In many ways, here's where it comes back to what I was just talking about. In many ways, the conversation about college resembles the national conversation about government. Like higher education, government is unimaginably large and complex, and the scope of its functions and impacts are difficult for the average person to understand. In other words, you're too dumb. It has to cost trillions of dollars to run our government. If you don't know that, you just don't get it because government is too complex. Same thing with the university. Universities cost billions of dollars to operate. So therefore, we all need to pitch in and pay more money to these people, even though we've pitched in endless amounts of resources over the last few decades. And if you don't know that, well, it's complicated. Just trust us. Give us more money so we can do our jobs. With a 50-year narrative about broken government accelerating in the Reagan era, many Americans now believe that we should privatize core parts of it or just throw the whole thing out. Yeah, 50 years is a long time to realize, boy, these things don't work. Maybe we should scrap it and start something else. Or undergo massive changes. If you're not going to scrap it, you need to undergo massive changes. That's the goal. The views on last paragraph. The views on higher education and government are equally short-sighted. We've been through these cycles before, and my response is always, you're going to have to show me this disaster that you think has occurred. Because when I look around, I don't see disaster. I see the most successful society in the human history in terms of elevating the well-being of its people, and government has played a big role in that. All right. We just had a whole article, and there have been countless other articles people have written about the disaster. Massive debt. Young people going into massive debt that they're having a heck of a time trying to climb themselves out of. And what was all that debt for? They're less intelligent, less skilled, less educated, less prepared than ever before. So when you go, boy, I don't really see any disasters going on. Did you read your own article? There are disasters all over the place. And the biggest one is, like I just said, massive debt, not prepared for life. Those are huge problems. If you don't know that, if you're not willing to see it, why would you concern yourself with reforming? You're not going to. And that's where universities are today, is they still hold on to this idea, which is a nice ideal, but it's just not reality. This idea that there are so many broad social and economic benefits to college that, yeah, even though it's not very good and it costs a lot of money, everyone should still do it, and you should still be willing to pay that price. And people are waking up and going, yeah, I don't think it is. I think I could get educated in a different way. I think it doesn't need to cost this much. Where's all my money going exactly? I'm paying $150,000 or whatever for my education. Who does that go to exactly? Where are all the resources? And why aren't there jobs available for me when I leave? Or if there are jobs available for me, why aren't I getting hired? Now, it might be the student's fault, and I'm very critical of students, as you've seen in other podcasts, and I'll continue to be, because they bear it's their life. They should be responsible for their choices. But we as educators, and those of us in the higher education, university industry, we have to look at ourselves. And right now, those people who run those places have no reason to look at themselves, because they're making a ton of money off the backs of these kids by continuing to tell them, you need college. The country needs you to go to college. So yeah, hand us your check and it'll be worth it, we promise. And all the employers on the other side are going, yeah, I think you could have done something different. I think you're not as prepared as they told you would be. And then other people come in and go, hey, looks like you need some education. We have a way that might be better. Do you want to try this way instead? It's cheaper and faster, and you'll be ready for that job you want. Yeah, that's called the market. That's called capitalism. That's what makes things better. We have to be open to that. And if you're not going to face it, you're going to run a university that is probably going to close, or you're going to be on that, scraping by every single semester, begging for students to please come to your school because you're running out of resources. So this is where the conversation is going. As I said, I'm going to keep adding to it in the coming weeks because I have some ideas of my own that people don't seem to be talking about. But this is the big conversation in the culture from an education standpoint, is what exactly is the value of universities anymore? And is it still worth it? Many people say yes. I have devoted my entire professional career to universities. So I believe in universities. I don't think we should tear these things down either. I want them to be better. But the first way to recover yourself is to admit there's a problem and then start implementing solutions that refocus what your true goal is and what the goal is for students, and get back to that. Because if you're not doing that, you're going to be a school that the market is going to weed you out. You're going to be a school that closes, and that's what's happening. So we need schools to do better. We need lots of different types of schools. And we need to provide the services that we say we provide. And we need to be honest with students about whether or not they should even go to university. So yeah, it's on both ends. It's on, like I said, it's on the enrollment side about who's leaving high school and thinking they need to go to college. And it's on the back end on the graduation side where right now they just aren't prepared. And they've spent a lot of money for not much of a return. And that's not good. So a lot of improvements are possible. We just have to be committed to doing them. And most of them do not require any additional money. Smart people can figure this out. And tough decisions will have to be made, but it will work. You just have to acknowledge that there's a problem in the first place. So we'll see if universities do that. We'll keep an eye on this trend of schools closing or facing other financial problems, and we'll keep talking about it. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Keep reading the articles that I post. Let me know what you think. Let me know what other topics you'd like me to cover on these podcasts. And as always, I appreciate you following English Champion on Substack. See you next time.